better than where I am, and I want to sort of progress my career, and money is one of those things that kind of get us there. And that was the biggest, almost motivating factor for me in terms of choosing a career. But the only thing, and the only rich people kind of I knew, or kind of career that I knew that would make quite a bit of money back then was a doctor, right? I thought, looking at this, I mean, doctor in sort of where I lived, a doctor drove the fanciest car, and it seemed to be the person that made the most money. So I wanted to do that, right? And that was kind of my dream.
Yeah.
From grade 8 and all the way up to about grade 10. But then life happened, and I think I got to about grade 10, 11, and I think I still tell the story quite often, but I wanted to be really cool. And I think if you guys, I mean, big football player now still, so they're not that old, but Cristiano Ronaldo was just coming onto the scene, and he had these pierced ears, right? And I think I used to play soccer, and I was like, well, why not? I mean, I wanted to look like that. I wanted to be cool, and I went and had my ears pierced. Got my ears pierced, as one does, and I fainted. I passed out.
Wow.
And it turned out that I couldn't handle blood. I couldn't handle the smell of medical stuff. I mean, a little bit of that surgical spirits that they put on your ear, I couldn't stand it.
Right.
We passed out in the chair, and then, I mean, I guess my decision was made for me. I couldn't become a doctor, and I think to a certain extent my dreams were shattered, right? Because this one thing that I knew that's going to make me lots of money when I get older is gone. It's something that I physically can't do. And then I started chatting to people, started chatting to my mom and people that she'd worked with, just to kind of get a little bit of career advice, because again, I've never been exposed to business. I've never been exposed to an engineer. Those types of things were something that were more distant concepts to me. I didn't understand what they do on a daily basis or what that actually entailed. And then someone at my mom's work, if memory serves, kind of introduced the chartered accounting stream to me, and they said, well, this is a potential option. Have you looked at that? And I was like, well, the first question is, well, how much do chartered accountants earn, right? I think a lot of us, that is, again, a big thing for us back when we are making that decision. And then I was like, well, this is almost the cream of the crop when it comes to the accounting and business type of degree. Let me go ahead and try it. And I went into into this space, not necessarily knowing what a CA does. I mean, you can research it on on the internet, and you can find a lot of information about it, but I never really understood what a chartered accountant does until I actually got into the swing of things and into the stream of things. So my pure decision back then was something that's gonna at least make me a little bit of money going forward. I mean, it's a little bit of a bad thing to say, but it's the truth in terms of why I chose that stream.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I mean, you mentioned a lot of things, and a lot of the stuff that you mentioned leans towards the right exposure about, where to study and what options are out there, and us at Levels Up, our goal is to empower youth and give them access to information that can really help them make the right decisions in terms of their careers. So I know that you and I both know the different degrees and streams and careers within the accountancy and the auditing profession. You can be a tax specialist, a management accounting specialist, an accounting specialist, or an auditor. And these are things that a lot of people don't know, which is what inspired our work at Levels Up. So perhaps if you could just tell us, from your experience, what are the different types of degrees and careers that you can expand on and explore? And you can even take us through your work at Malander Advisory, specifically on the focus of the recruitment side of the business. What are the careers that are in demand in the accountancy and the auditing profession? And what are the different things you can apply to at university?
Perfect. So I think maybe start off by saying that, I mean, when you look at the accounting stream or the business stream, if you want to call it that, there are so many options and there are broad levels of things to study. I think it's overwhelming looking at a career or university list of subjects in determining to choose one, because there are so many different streams. And I think, I mean, if I look back, and I don't know how much it's changed now, so please forgive me, but a BCom, for an example, had almost 8 to 10 different streams. And you're like, well, what difference is it? What is BCom investments versus BCom financial management versus BCom resources and all these different elements? So I think the key thing before having a look at that is understanding what motivates and drives you, right? I think as an individual, you need to understand a little bit about what your goals are, but not necessarily in the sense of I want to do this on a daily basis, but more about what drives you and what pushes you forward. So if it's people that you get motivated by, then there should be an element of people in what you're looking to do. Or if it's sort of numbers and accounting, then there should be that element of numbers and accounting in what you do. Or if it's business and the overall business sense, then look for those types of elements in that career, because as much as there are these streams, what you can do at the end of that is quite broad. You might study auditing, you might study a certain element, but you find a lot of people don't necessarily continue and follow that stream in its direct sense. There's a lot of things that you can do. So, I mean, coming back to your question, I mean, there's so many different ranges, and I think it comes, as you mentioned or correctly mentioned, there's the internal auditing or auditing space, essentially, two similar things done at different levels, and that's kind of one area of focus. Again, for me, audit isn't the most fun because it's a ticking and bashing exercise, and I think a lot of people who are in the audit space will hate me for saying that. But again, it comes back to what drives you as an individual, and I think what audit did teach me is business processes. It taught me sort of how to effectively run a business and how to look out for challenges and issues, right? And I think without that, even though audit isn't something that I enjoy, I wouldn't have been able to run a business today, because those things are very, very important in terms of making a business tick over. So I guess you kind of get the internal auditing and auditing faction, which is quite an interesting space to be. And you get things like, I mean, there's lots of ranges out there, like sort of, for example, if you think of things like SAICA and the management accounting route, which is also very much in demand in South Africa at the moment and worldwide. I think SAICA is internationally recognized. And the beauty of finance is that you can go anywhere in the world and finance will be needed, right? So that's one element. Every business, just as every human would possibly or probably interact with a doctor at some stage of their lives, every business interacts with an accountant in a way or form in some stage, or almost on a daily basis in most cases, but in some stage of the life cycle of a business. So I think that's kind of something just to bear in mind, is that the world isn't necessarily just the space that you find yourself in, being the province or the city or the town. The world's quite big, and looking at those skill sets that you can gain from following the finance route is that it is adaptable to anywhere in the world. So SAICA and the management accounting route also is a viable option because it is that internationally recognized. The taxation space, again, there's also, I mean, another key element of business. I think there's always that saying that there's two things that are certain in life: it's death and taxes, right? So
right, again, yes.
There's always going to be a need for, and the tax space, if that is something that drives you and that motivates you, there is an element of pushing things down that road, because it's very sort of, if I had to put that into what the type of work that you do, it's almost very legislative. So there's a set of rules that you follow in terms of what you need to do, and it's about the application of those rules essentially to be able to assist a company from a taxation perspective, and assist the country or whatever environment you're operating from a taxes perspective, essentially. So there's those, in my mind, are sort of the audit space, the tax space, sort of the accounting space, and in the management accounting space, and then moving into the chartered accounting space, which is a stream that I've followed. Again, showing that accounting is so diverse, but it also gives you the opportunity to understand business, right? And I think the beauty of accounting is that it gives you that ability to understand the way a business works. And the chartered accounting designation, in my mind, kind of encompasses a lot of that, right? So we spoke about auditing, we spoke about tax, we spoke about management accounting, and the chartered accounting designation, again, encompasses all of those elements. And I think for me, what was the benefit of what chartered accounting gave me in studying was two things. One was the ability to understand business from all those facets. So instead of specializing to a certain extent in either internal audit or tax or management accounting or anything on those lines, it gave me the opportunity to have a bit more of a broader knowledge of how a business works. But the other thing that it gave me that I thought was sort of pivotal in my career was opportunity, right? And what I mean by that is becoming a chartered accountant gave me the opportunity to do various amount of things. It gave me the opportunity to travel the world. So, I mean, again, I've had the opportunity to live and work in Chicago in the USA, in just outside New York in the USA, in London. So it gave me that opportunity to be able to travel the world and see the world, which is one of the things that I wanted out of my career. I wanted to be able to kind of see the world and meet different people and get exposure to different cultures, and that was very important for me, and it gave me the opportunity to opportunity to do that. I said this earlier, but it gave me the opportunity to understand business, and that again meant that I could start my own business because I understood the way a business works or the way a business should work from a mechanics perspective, essentially. Not that there's a blueprint, but it does give you the principles on which to guide business, both from an ethics perspective and from an operational perspective. And then it also gave me the opportunity to meet different people, right? So I think in that space and going through sort of the chartered accounting stream, you do things like articles, where you get to meet so many different people from so many different backgrounds that have different views on life. And I think because you all are going through the same thing, you form a sort of bond through your articles, because you all study for board exams. You all kind of have the same stresses at a similar sort of time. And I think there's that stresses in business that somebody that hasn't gone through it won't necessarily understand, right? So the stress of a deadline is understood so much more by your peers than it is by someone that hasn't gone through the process or hasn't done that in their career, essentially. So you form a big bond from a friendships perspective within that space. And I think the chartered accountant space gave me a lot of opportunity. But taking that back into directly to what your question was in terms of what are the in-demand skills in South Africa at the moment and in the world at the moment, I definitely think that we still do have a lack of chartered accountants, that in that space, there is a lot that a chartered accountant can do to turn around the economy that we find ourselves in. We have a lack of business professionals and entrepreneurs, and finance again feeds into that. So if there is any form of let's say, business management degree, those types of things, if you are looking to get into the entrepreneurial space, I would say that is a good avenue to look at. Even things like a postgraduate MBA, those types of things are quite sort of substantial, and they do put you in good stead from a business understanding perspective. Direct skills, there's still a lack of accounting skills within South Africa. And there are sort of lots of jobs available within that space. And I think we're seeing the rise of smaller business. And what I mean by that is larger businesses in the South African environment are to a certain extent suffering. Unemployment rate is skyrocketing, and what's going to need to happen in the future, we're going to have business that takes over and individuals that take over to be able to create employment. And with that means that smaller businesses are on the rise, and they're going to eventually need the skills that come through from a finance and accounting perspective, from an audit perspective, from a tax and management accounting perspective. So I do think there's going to be a big demand for these skill sets going forward.
Okay. So, really what we're getting from that is, you need to continuously study further, and pursue careers that give you a lot of options, and the beauty about the accountancy and the auditing profession is that there's so many different options that you can explore. The qualification itself is very wide and diverse. You can specialize in tax, in management accounting, in audit, financial accounting, and the world really does become your oyster. But just take us back, Lyle, to your time. Now we've had the conversation about how you became a chartered accountant. It was entirely, based on the fear of blood, as it were, because you really wanted to be a doctor, and remuneration was very important to you. And I think remuneration now is actually very important to our kids as well. So the jobs that they get, or the jobs that they want, and the qualifications that they study towards must be well paying, which is why entrepreneurship is something that's become very popular as well. But we'll get to that later. So now, you've made the decision, you've decided you want to be a chartered accountant, you're at university in the Cape, and, it's your first year, you're meeting all these different people from all these other provinces and other parts of the world. And all you guys have in common is you want to be chartered accountants. You're not having as much fun as some of the other kids, who are studying degrees that are less hectic in terms of study time. But also, you're learning, you realize that the material is so interesting, and it's so vast, and it's so rich compared to accounting at high school level. And also, we know that there are different streams for you to study accounting. So in the accountancy qualifications and degrees at universities, there's, the straight CA stream, so for aspiring chartered accountants, and then you can do a general BCom degree in accounting. And then obviously you can specialize in the other financial disciplines like auditing, tax, etc. So, you're in this, this microcosm of accountancy and auditing, Tell us about your experience at university.
Yeah, so I mean, I think university is a bit of a different time. And I think that transition from high school to university life is something that was probably the most difficult, because you get into a space of where you almost get, for lack of a better word, spoon-fed, right? At high school, if you don't do your homework, you either get detention or you get to write lines or whatever. I'm not too sure how that's changed now, but there is some form of punishment for not doing your work. So you almost do it. I guess me, certainly, I did my homework at high school because I didn't want the repercussions of not doing it, not because I wanted to do it, right? So I think moving into university, you get that natural migration over to a sense of self-responsibility, and the only person that you can rely on to a certain extent is yourself, right? And I think there's an element of you feeling lonely in that space, because firstly, and for me, I certainly did, because I did have peers that were studying the same thing. I had friends that moved over to the university, but for the first time, I almost had to make a decision on my own future, right? Nothing was going to be done for me. I needed to make that decision. I needed to work and put in the effort for my own future. No one was going to do anything for me. And I needed to at least put on my big boy pants and actually move forward, right? So it was a very difficult time from that perspective. Taking that back into the different streams. And again, you sort of sitting with so many different options. And I think the one thing that confuses a lot of us and just a normal thing is, if we have too many options, we almost get a little bit flustered and don't know where to go. And I think that was the biggest challenge that I had to deal with. And I got to a point where I said, well, I've chosen this route, let me go with it and see and take it as it comes, because they effectively are sort of there's time to change later down the line, right? So you can go follow this channel, and if it is something that you kind of understand and you know it, go with it, because you effectively I mean, life's never set in stone and black and white, right? You can change your careers at any point in time, I guess. But yeah, taking that back to essentially the space that you kind of coming into university and you're in this new environment and new space. I think that challenge and that newfound sense of responsibility is probably the biggest thing to overcome. And I think it's just kind of taking a step back and realizing that the only way that I can succeed and prosper is if I do this for myself. No one necessarily is going to, I mean, you have mentors, you have people that can guide you and that can coach you, but if you're not going to put in the effort and work to be able to get to where you want to be and whatever your end goal is, then it's going to be very difficult for you to get there. I think you can't necessarily coast along in university, because it's kind of not made for that, right? You have to be able to understand and put in your efforts to the best of your ability to be able to get to where you want to be. And I think the key element to that is also having an element of enjoying what you do, right? I know nobody really enjoys studying. I know very few special ones of us do. Nobody really enjoys studying. Nobody really enjoys sort of sitting down for 8 hours of a day, just going through reading and those types of things. But I think it's kind of keeping that end goal in mind. Where is it that you want to go and where is it that you want to achieve? And that end goal changes, right? As you progress and as you move along, shift those goals along with that, because you're always working towards something. And I think that's what kept me going through that space is what is my next step and what is my goals and how do I work towards getting that?
Stunning. So yes, and I think it's also important just to mention that, the different qualifications in the accountancy profession are quite transferable, so you can, as long as you have a commerce degree and you complete it, there are various different ways in which, you can explore other qualifications within the profession and, really diversify your career. I know we have quite a few questions coming in and, we'll address them as and when they come up. And I think one that's really relevant speaks to the accountancy profession and the fourth industrial revolution. So a really good question being asked there. So, as a recruiter, because, you do advisory, but you're also a recruiter, you understand the landscape of the accountancy profession. What are the in-demand skills? And you understand the impact of technology on our jobs. You and I both know that the accountancy profession changes year on year. In the early 90s, partners at audit firms would be carrying around these massive files, and taking them back and forth between the trainees, etc. And that's where all of the work was. And now everything is digital. Everything is on your laptop. All of our trainees are running around, running in heels, with their laptops. It's not like it used to be. Looking into the future, knowing what you know, our students in university who still have an option to decide to just take up one extra qualification, one extra credit, one extra, skill of the future module, so to speak, what would you say to them? And I think our matriculants should also pay real attention to this, because, now that they're making that decision to apply to university, it's important to be mindful of where this is all going.
Agreed. So I mean, the first thing I'd say is keep an open mind, right? Because we don't necessarily 4 hours a year, and it's definitely something. I mean, the fourth industrial revolution is something that we can't shy away from. Technology is something that we can't shy away from, and it's making lives better to a certain extent, because it's making certain processes easier within the business environment, right? So it's definitely here to stay. So it's something that should be embraced. I remember being in university, and we did sort of courses on Pastel, if I remember correctly. And Pastel at that point in time was we had to raise invoices. You kind of sit with a box of slips and have to type your invoices into the computer, those types of things. And now how that has changed is, I mean, we have accounting systems now that feed your bank directly into your accounting system, and all you need to do is allocate. You take a picture of your receipts, and it directly reads what's on your receipts, and it posts transactions. All you need to do is click approve. So how that mindset has changed from a business perspective is less doing and more thinking, right? So I mean, I still don't believe that there's sort of the human element can be taken away, because there's the elements of, to a certain extent, emotion and out of the box thinking that come with the ability from a human perspective. So that thinking out of the box, that ability to be adaptable from a business perspective is going to be very important. So, I mean, how do you get to that point is when you're studying. I mean, I did very much sort of OES methods when I studied, right? And I wouldn't recommend this. So OES method is kind of looking through a test and saying, oh, this is what the question is. Let me go read the answer and see, okay, this is the answer. And then, okay, if I know I get a similar question, then the answer should be something similar to that, right?
Yeah.
I think that pretty much set me up for certain elements of failure, because I never took the time to understand what it was that I was actually doing. And I think that's going to be the important distinguishing factor when you go through these processes. Even though there might be elements of things in what you're doing from a university perspective or at a school perspective that you might find is outdated, there's an element on the background of that, of understanding that process. Because if you understand that process, your ability to work alongside technology would be a lot easier, because your job doesn't then necessarily become doing what the technology does, but it becomes interpreting what the output from that technology actually is, and it becomes understanding the environment that you now find yourself in. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. I embrace technology, and I think I did do a web development course not too long ago. I mean, it's quite weird, an accountant doing a web development course, but it just gave me that ability to understand the IT languages. We have a digital business within our business, and we just launched a freelancer app. And that freelancer app is something that I've been very involved in, because understanding that even though I'm an accountant, I need to think outside the box. I need to understand where the world is moving towards, because we need to develop solutions for that. And I think as educated individuals and coming through those spaces, you have that ability to not only do what it is that you are studying to do, but you have the ability to come up with solutions to world's problems, right? And I think that's where the mindset should be. Is you're studying to do something, and what solutions are you bringing, or what solutions are you looking to implement, and constantly looking for better ways of doing things. And I think that's, if there's any motivation and drive for any person going into the working world, is to say, well, how do I firstly embrace the technology that's coming in to be able to do things a little bit better and easier, but also how do I assist and aid in finding solutions to the world's problems. But we can't also necessarily always find solutions to problems if we don't have an understanding of the way things used to work, or the way things do work, or a way to identify what those problems actually are.
Stunning. So apt. And I think, problem solving, solution identification is what underpins entrepreneurship. And I'd like for us to get to that a bit later. But really, I think when we speak about Lyle, the entrepreneur, Lyle, the CEO of Lyle Malander Advisory, and we're getting a lot of questions about how you made a success of your business. So we'll get to that quickly. But I'd like us just to wrap up, your chapter in university and your chapter in articles. Everyone has that iconic moment when they finally pass their qualification, they finally pass their degree, they get into the working world, And like you were saying earlier, you know, they start building social capital. All the people that you are in articles with, you're all on the same slave ship, so to speak. You know, you are really just struggling through every day of articles and trying to learn and develop yourself, and becomes a camaraderie with it, you know. And towards the end of it, when you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you've passed your first qualifying exam, the second qualifying exam, you've made an impression on the company where you're going to work, you're looking to actually, you know, stay on in the firm, or you're starting to look for a job. But you have that iconic moment when you get your results, you've passed, you've qualified, you're a CASA, you get to write that at the end of your name. Where were you and what were you doing when you found out that you were a chartered accountant?
Okay, so I mean, yeah, it's a very iconic moment, and I think there's a few steps along the way. So, Johnny, if you don't mind, I'm going to take us a little bit of a step back. So, I finished, or kind of, and for a lot of you that may be in honors at the moment, or moving to honors, it's probably probably one of the most difficult years of your life, right? It's one of those challenging types of environments. So when I got to my CTA or be accounting honors, essentially, I got to the end of the year and I had a pass mark of 40, or a year mark of 40%. And I sat in class, and my sort of the lecturers were saying to the class, well, for those of you that have 45% going into the exam, don't worry, you guys will be okay. People have done it in the past. And I sat there thinking, well, I mean, I'm 5% below that. I'm way off the mark here. I literally just made it into the exam by the skin of my teeth. Where do I go to from here? And I think that for me was a moment of realization to say, well, nobody can tell me to give up. I need to tell myself either I give up or I'll move forward, and not take sort of cognizant around people telling me that I can't do anything or that it's not possible or anything along those lines. And I ended up passing that year. I mean, I had a re-exam, but I ended up passing my honors year from a 40% base. But I think it was just because I took the decision at that point in time to say, well, I'm not going to give up as yet. And I think that's an important thing going forward, and I've carried that through to the rest of my life, essentially, is that even though the odds are stacked against you, and it might not have been done before, or there's no case study to prove that it is possible, it's not necessarily to say that it cannot be done. And I think that's kind of a very important lesson that I live my day by day by. But yeah, so fast forward, what is that, 3 years, end of 2012, found out, or middle of 2012, found out that I passed sort of second board exam. And we, at the big four firms, you generally have a little board results party, and we had it at the country club in Johannesburg. Everyone kind of gets together, has a bit of a braai, and a bit of a socializing. And I think it's just a day to calm the nerves. But I think that day is probably one of the most refreshing days. I think it's you get to that point of where you find out that you passed the exams and you're now officially qualified. It makes all the hard work that you've done up until that point in time worth it. And it wasn't necessarily, it was more a feeling of relief than a feeling of joy, because you got to a point of where everything culminated and everything built you up to that day. And you now know that no one can take that away from you. You got to a point of where you worked hard for 7, 8, 9, 10 years to be able to get to that point, and the realization is that no one can take that designation away from you because you've worked hard for it and you own it. It's yours. Buying your first house and paying it off, or buying your first car, right? You've put in so much effort to get there, and it's just a refreshing feeling to know that you've worked hard to get something that you now officially own.
Yeah, stunning. So just there are a couple of questions coming through from some of our university students. So you'll know that we invited the student chapters of a lot of the universities, and they're so thrilled and excited. I see their questions coming through. So yes, if you are studying towards a BCom economics or investments qualification, you would have to have been studying towards an accountancy stream qualification. So BCom accounting, Bachelor of Business Science, Bachelor of Accountancy, Bachelor of Accounting Science, in order for you to be in the CA stream. So you have to be at a university that is a SAICA accredited university and study towards a 4-year degree in accountancy specifically, and that grants you access for you to actually obtain the designation, after which you'd write your qualifying exams, and then you do your articles, and then you'd qualify. So really just it's about not giving up. It's about delayed gratification. You know, it's about really just putting in the hours, not looking at the clock, keeping your head down and staying focused. I know a lot of the people that are listening today they're in fourth year, you know, they're in CTA, which is the eye of the chartered accountancy storm, in my view. It's the most difficult year of all. You know, everyone knows about CTA. I know a lot of recruiters will talk about whether you passed in your first attempt, your second attempt. So just to distinguish you from the pack, that's how serious it is. Lyle, do you have any words of encouragement, you know, to the people that are in matric now, obviously, and, you know, the people who are in CTA, just to say, you know, it's a very difficult year. I mean, it's unprecedented. We've never gone through anything like this. They're in such a game-changing year, you know, in terms of their career. Matric is so critical. CTA is so critical. Even our third year, you know, commerce students, it's so critical. What do you have to say, just quickly, I'm looking at the time, to those students? What do you have to say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for each, and let's start with the matrics. I think it's a very difficult space that you find yourself in, and don't let anybody discount that for you. I think you have to make a sort of a very big decision in that space, but it's not necessarily as life altering as it's made out to be to a certain extent. I say that very tongue in cheek because obviously it is a career that you're choosing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that life can't pivot later down or later on in life. But I mean, I would just take a step back and say, well, what is it that motivates and drives me? And the choice that I'm making, will it be able to give me that, of what sort of, would it be able to give me a career that makes me want to get out of bed in the morning? And I think that's maybe something to understand. For the guys in third year and in honors or in fourth year, yeah, I mean, this is the top of the mountain, right? I think you get to that point. If you think about climbing a mountain, you get to the top and then it's downhill on the other side. So I know it's a very, very difficult time for me. It definitely was a very, very challenging space, and it takes up a lot of your social life and time. But it's kind of that thing of that sets you up for the next steps in your career. And it's and why I say it's a mountain, because you almost reach the top of that effort levels that you need to put in, and it's almost downhill after this. So once you get through this, you get to do a little bit more of the fun stuff in putting all that stuff that you learned into practice. You get to meet new people, you get to get into new environments, and you get to earn some money after that, right? I think that's also something to look forward to. But it definitely for me was the top of the hill. So kind of it's getting through this, is reaching the summit, and then it's just downhill from there. So I mean, just put your head down and make the most of it. Have fun while you're doing it. Get an understanding of what you're doing. But yeah, just realize that the effort that you put in now is going to set you up for the next stages in your career. And as Brajani said, that I mean, when you do get recruited, there is a question around, rightfully or wrongly, I'm not one to judge, but there is a question around, did you pass CTA first time, second time, third time? To me, it doesn't really matter. I think it depends on character, but it does have an impact on your career going forward. So yeah, all the best and good luck with that space. I think it's just having that grit and resilience in the next sort of to get over that hurdle is going to be very important, and the road does get a little smoother after this.
Okay, no, absolutely. So just some words of encouragement there from Lyle Malander, you know, to everyone. So just hang in there, you know, make the most of it. It all starts with you, and really, you know, just grit your teeth and get the work done. I'd just like to fast forward a bit to where you are today, or where you were when you started your business, right? A really interesting question coming through about how do you make $1 billion? We know that Malander Advisory made, you know, 40 million Rand in 2.5 years of business, which is incredible by any means, you know, by any standard. So just take us to that decision to be an entrepreneur, post articles at the big 4 firms. What made you decide to be an entrepreneur? What made you decide to, you know, just do your own thing? And what was your frame of mind like at that time?
Yeah, I think it's a very scary thing to get into, and I definitely was sort of very afraid to make the decision. But I think one important thing to understand is that for me personally, entrepreneurship isn't a job or career choice; it's a way of life, right? So I think in that when I sat in that frame of mind, I didn't necessarily think about the revenue. I didn't think about the money. I thought about the difference that I wanted to make and the change that I wanted to make, and I think that was the driving factor behind why I wanted to get in business. Not that the revenue isn't important because that keeps business going, not that the sort of making money isn't important, but it was a lot about what is the impact that I was wanting to make from a business perspective, because at the end of the day, every business out there has an impact on a person's life, on a person's livelihood, on a business, and on a business success. So those are the things that kind of went through my mind, and what was on top of my mind when I made that decision of moving into the entrepreneurial space. I think what pushed me over the edge was something I was wanting to do this, and I was on the fence. I then approached my current business partner, Shavera John, at that point in time, and I said to her, well, listen, I'm thinking of starting this business. Do you want to get involved with me? And the response was absolutely, let's do it. And I think for me, that was someone else believed in my dream at that point in time, or someone else believed in the dream at that point. And that was something that kind of said, well, why not do it? I have someone else that's going to kind of back me up.
Yeah.
And so let's go ahead and do it. And that's what ultimately pushed me over the edge to say, well, let's go, let's leave a cushy corporate job and go and do this. And I think the other element of that is we sat down and said, well, what is the worst thing that can happen if we did this, right? So if I went and did this business and it failed, I could go back and sleep on my mom's couch, or I could kind of try and live with friends or make things happen. And that was the worst case scenario for me. And I was like, am I comfortable with that at that point in time? And my answer was absolutely, I'm comfortable with that. And that's kind of the decision-making process into getting into the field of entrepreneurship. It's not glamorous. It's not something where you can sort of choose your own hours. I know a lot of people say you get into entrepreneurship and you can choose your own hours. There's a lot of flexibility, yes, but there's a lot more effort and hard work that goes into building something. So I think that's kind of things to be aware of when getting into that space. I mean, if you are looking to get into that space, doesn't necessarily have to be done alone.
Okay. All right. So definitely worth considering to get into business with a business partner. You know, you get to leverage off of each other's skill set, you know, so every business needs someone who can sell, and then every business needs someone who's very good at finance, you know. But take us to that moment where, you know, you got your first client. Where did you get your first client? What was that like? Because I know right now, you know, with the unemployment rate the way that it is, with the retrenchments the way that they are as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, people are really considering doing their own thing, you know, and this is really from a point of just livelihood, you know, not from a point of passion or exploring, you know, new opportunities. It's an issue of livelihood, you know. Where do you get your first client? Who's the first person that gives you a break, and what was the case for you?
Okay, so I think, I mean, within moving into, and especially in the professional services business, right, you come with an element of reputation. I think reputation is everything in that space. So I think moving into, even when if you find yourself in matric, if you find yourself in university, if you find yourself in articles, all the interactions that you have in this point in time sets you up for later on in life, right? I think there's an element of sort of social networking that we spoke about a little bit earlier, but that becomes very important when you start your own business, because when people interact with you for the first time and to try and get your first client, they're almost interacting with you as an individual in the professional services space, because you're not necessarily, and for us specifically, we weren't selling a product, we were selling a service, and we were selling people that were going to deliver that service, right? So there needed to be an element of trust in your abilities, and that only comes from the hard work that you put in from any phase within your life. So for example, if you were to look for a client, people would say, oh, I know this person, I've dealt with them before on a different matter, but I know they won't let me down. And I think that's kind of a key thing for that first client, and looking into that space is it actually starts a lot longer than when you actually decide to start your business, because you build up a bit of a personal brand and personal reputation. And I think that was quite that is quite important. So for me, our first client was simply because of that. We built up a personal reputation, we built up a work ethic, and I believe that that's what got us our first client is a personal brand, and we then could grow on from there into building that business brand, essentially, specifically within the professional services space, because you don't have a pure tangible product that you're actually selling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you know, like you say, a lot of the work that you do when you're providing a service as a professional is based on, you know, your social capital. So all the people that you've met throughout your time and your journey in becoming a chartered accountant, then ultimately pursuing your own, you know, business, but also, you know, through articles, etc. So it's about social capital, but it's also about trust. you know, and trust has become a huge theme, you know, for chartered accountants in recent times. We've seen all of the different corporate scandals coming through, your KPMGs, you know, your VBS, etc. And obviously, as a chartered accountant, one of the first lessons that we are taught is ethics. Ethics are everything. And in business, whether you're a chartered accountant or not, whether you're selling, you know, donuts or you're selling a professional service, everyone wants to feel a sense of trust of the service that you're going to provide. So if you're selling a donut, the person wants to believe that that is a donut. It tastes like a donut. It looks like a donut. It's going to be delicious. And every day I am going to, you know, come here and find you, and you will be there. And so it's about reliability. It's about trust. Our profession has gone through a lot. It's not a question that I like to ask because it puts you on the spot, and, you know, now you're making declarations for people that you don't even know. You know, we all just happen to wear the same CASA hat, but now you have to answer for people who you don't even know, you know, so it's a bit unfair, but the question has come through on the platform, and I do feel we do need to address it. So on the ethics side, on the business side, on the trust side, which underpins every business, tell us what your thoughts are.
No, I mean, I think it's a very important component of any business, right? I think if you look at this sort of all the scandals that are happening and everything that's happening within the space, I think one thing to realize is that there's a limit, or at least a time period to which you'll get caught being unethical, right? So I think that's, I mean, it might be a short-term gain if anyone has that frame of mindset, like it's a quick win, I can make some quick cash. I don't think there's such a thing, right? You need to work hard to be able to get to that point in time and develop trust around that, essentially. So, I mean, I think sort of it's a very difficult space that the profession finds themselves in, but it's actions of certain individuals. I think if you think about the number of chartered accountants there are versus the number of people implicated in scandals, it is a small percentage of individuals that are implicated in the different scandals sort of around South Africa at the moment. And I think what the other element of that to realize is that chartered accountants put people in position of power, right? And when you're in a position of power, you have the ability to make decisions, and those decisions have repercussions. So there's still a lot of chartered accountants that are out there that are doing good things, that are making decisions, that are leading businesses ethically in the correct manner. I think that's something to point out, is that the percentage, if you had to kind of put I mean, I don't know the numbers, but a large percentage of chartered accountants in high profile positions are doing good things, and they're making a positive difference, and they're making positive change. So there is an element of bad apples, if you want to call it that, within that space. And I think you find that in every area. You give sort of, if there are elements and people in positions of power, there are going to be a few bad apples along the way. Not that it's correct, not that it should be sort of looked up at. It's something that we need to weed out as professionals, but we also as individuals have that responsibility to point it out, right? And I think the good thing is happening is that we are pointing it out, because if we don't and we let it slide, we almost complicit in that. And I think that's something key to kind of take away. So, I mean, if you are discouraged from being a chartered accountant because of what you're seeing in the media of certain things that are happening in certain different countries, then, or in certain different companies, if you want to call it that, and with certain different individuals, one way to change that is to become a part of that and point out that corruption and root out that weeds and become and set an example within that space, because that's the only way we're going to get to a different or to a better place, at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You know, I see quite a few questions coming through on the group as well. And it really it starts with you, you know, it starts with you. And that's the slogan that we carry for the Meet the Mentor event. We'll be having quite a number of other events coming up. And I just think it's very important for us just to remember to take responsibility for self, you know, and like you say, be a whistleblower. If there is an issue and you are party to it, then, you know, it starts with you, you know, you become complicit, and it's important for you to acknowledge that and to do the right thing, and to, you know, to be a whistleblower. Just going back to business, you know, I mean, it's so difficult to be an entrepreneur. It's positioned as this glamorous thing, and it's actually not that glamorous. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of long hours. It's a lot of pivoting, changing, adapting. I think the coronavirus has been and a pandemic has been an excellent example of how adaptable you have to be in business for your business to survive and thrive. You know, Malander Advisory has a lot of different revenue streams. So you have the advisory, you have the recruitment, and you mentioned now that you're exploring a technology aspect and element of the business. My experience with entrepreneurs is that they're risk takers, they are innovators, and they like to try different things. How much of the changes that you've made to the business have been as a result of you as an entrepreneur trying and exploring new things? How much of them have been about trial and error? You know, you try this, it doesn't work. You try that, it doesn't work. Talk to us about adaptability and risk taking in business.
Yeah, I mean, I think adaptability and risk taking in business it kind of goes hand in hand, right? I think it's one of those things where there needs to be an element of taking risks. But I think being a chartered accountant, and I'm very thankful for having that training, is because it gave me the ability to make calculated risks, right? So, I mean, I think we can look at things and say, well, and again, I go back to something that I said a little bit earlier, is what is the worst thing that can happen and can I live with it? I think that's kind of what a lot of things that I use in making decisions, in saying, well, what is, for example, if we're looking to enter into a new business line, is saying, well, how long can we sustain it for? What is our risk and how much money will we potentially lose from doing that? And what is the impact if it does go bust and the worst case scenario? And this isn't everyone's way of thinking. I know there's a lot of more optimistic people out there. I think chartered accountants, or sort of as a chartered accountant, you tend to be very risk averse. So that does creep in all the time. But I kind of look at things and say, well, what is the worst case scenario, and can I live with the consequences of that as a worst case scenario? And then if the answer to that is yes, then generally it is the same. Well, let's go and try it out, because a lot of business, and especially in the growth phase, is about trying out new things, right? You can't necessarily do the same thing over and over and kind of expect things to just be the same. So business, you need to be adaptable. And as you said, the coronavirus has given us another challenge that we need to, and another hurdle that we need to get over, because I mean, if part of our business strategy was to meet people, we can't meet people anymore because there's social distancing. There's things that are sort of enforced upon us that we need to change the way we do business. So I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, you need to have that mindset of forward thinking. You need to be thinking about a year from now, not necessarily about what has happened in the past, because you can't necessarily change the past, right? Although you can learn from it, you can't change it. So look at what has happened, sort of, or your experiences, and it's a culmination of all your experiences that make that process easier. So you would have failed so many times that you know that not to make that same mistake again. And failure takes the form of failed businesses, or it takes the form of making a bad decision. And it happens. It's inevitable within business. Everybody's going to do it. You're going to get to a point of where you make mistakes, but those mistakes don't define you. It's those mistakes that you learn from and pushes you to do better. And I think that's key to the entrepreneur, or the entrepreneur's mindset, is that they're stumbling blocks. They're not the be all and end all, I guess.
It's so true. It's so true. And a lot of questions coming through about that as well. Also, just to mention to all the people who are, writing in and sending questions, thank you so much for your questions. It makes the dialogue so rich, so engaging. There's a gig of data up for grabs for the best question. Lyle will decide which question he enjoyed answering the most, and we'll post it on our social media page. So remember to follow us on Levels Up in Facebook, and on Instagram, levelsup.sa. So I'd like to just explore this, this trial and error, this making mistakes, because that's another question that comes up. And as a social entrepreneur myself, it's something that, you always have to make and make a distinction between trial and error versus this is a really big mistake for my business, I shouldn't have done that, and resilience. So pushing through the trial and error phase of a business until you get a product or a service that works and that people will buy or pay for again and again. Could you just tell us about that distinction? I mean, I was having a conversation with Abed the other day, our friend, also a serial entrepreneur, and I'd read a chapter in his book, and he spoke about giving up and when do you know to give up, when to pivot, when to change. Could you just talk to us about that aspect and element of business? Because I know a lot of my mentees come to me and they want to try something new, they want to try a new business. Could you just talk to us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very difficult one to answer, and the reason, and it's a very difficult thing for entrepreneurs to go through, because as a starting point, when you start a new business or you start a new product, you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and to just throw something away after you've put so much effort into it is probably one of the most difficult decisions you can make in business, right? Because you've put all this effort into it and you feel like you're throwing away all that effort. I think you need to kind of have a critical look at things and say, well, I mean, trial and error is pretty much what business is, right? You're going through things, this works, this doesn't work, so I need to pivot. This works, this doesn't work, so I need to pivot. Or this works, let me carry on with it. But then the other sort of issue is it might work for a little bit of time and then it stops working because the world is moving and things are changing and what people want changes. So there's a lot of that in the processes, and I think you kind of need to critically look at your final objectives and what you're trying to achieve, right? And if you're moving away from what those objectives are, then maybe it is time to relook at things. And those objectives will be firstly in the form of money. Are you making enough money within that businesses? But are you making the right impact within those businesses essentially as well? And are you doing it in the right way? And I think all those things, a culmination of all those things need to be taken into consideration in terms of whether things are an error or whether things are working correctly or perfectly, but then also constantly looking at what you're doing from a business perspective to say, well, is it still working? And I think that's the key thing is what you're doing still working? Because it could work today, it could work tomorrow, but the next day it could fall flat on its face because it's no longer relevant. That's the key thing to take into that is consistently looking at the space that you find yourself in, and is it giving you, is it reaching your objectives or moving in the right direction of reaching your objectives? Is it sustaining itself from a money perspective and from a revenue perspective? And does it still fit into your overall strategy? I think that's kind of the three things to kind of take about.
Yeah, we have quite a number of people coming through from the sciences, and one of the questions relates to cross qualifications. So where you have more than one discipline, and this is something that I really believe in. So today you're a businessman and a chartered accountant, and I think having more than one skill that you're very good at is just the future of making money and of being employable and being an economic contributor in any setting. One of our questions is, the person would like to know, being a CA and an actuary, is that something that you advise? Just to Courage and to Tabo, who are asking us about that, we actually have an actuary coming on next week. So perhaps you can ask him that as well. Quickly, Lyle, could you let us know your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of it as well. I think I'm a big fan of empowering yourself to be able to move in the right direction, right? So I think having different, or having sort of more than one degree, or having more than one stream of education can only set you up for success in the longer run, because you're understanding different elements of the way the world works, right? The world works on different things, and I think the more you understand about different elements and different factions within the working environment, the more likely you are to come up with solutions, right? So 100% agree that there is an element of there's an advantage to be gained from having different a different mindset. And I think different careers and different university degrees, if you want to call it that, gives you different mindsets and different perceptions on the world, right? And I think that's also something just to bear in the back of your mind, that you see things through a different lens. And once you do that and have the ability to see things through different lenses, you have the ability to come up with solutions a lot more actively. Yes. I mean, I think, and it happens quite often. I mean, there's CAs that are doctors, there's CAs that are entrepreneurs, there's CAs that are actuarial scientists, there's CAs that do a whole bunch of, there are CAs that are sportsmen or sportsmen and women. So I think there's an element of sort of differentiation that you bring into your career if you have exposure to different streams.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to wrap it up, everyone. Thank you so much for your questions. We're still being flooded. I mean, it's just been such an incredible session. Lyle is a very busy man. He's got many businesses to run, but I believe very strongly in giving back. I believe very strongly in country duty. And I'd like just to touch on Lyle, the philanthropist. You have the Malander for Change organization, and you work as a co-chair of FinBiz2030, whose goal and objective is to, get business to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals issued by the United Nations more quickly and more efficiently. Can you talk to us about the importance of giving back? I mean, you actually don't have to if you don't want to, but you've made that choice, and it's a time sacrifice, and it doesn't pay in rands or dollars or pounds, but it pays in other ways. Could you just talk to us about that a bit?
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, we have an element of social responsibility, whether it be to our families or sort of our communities in general, right? I think for a lot of us, we come from a background of where we never had everything, or we never had exposure to everything, we never had the most money growing up, or we kind of had to make a lot of sacrifices, and you understand that level of sacrifice that has to be made. I know my parents made a lot of sacrifices for me to be able to go to university and for me to be able to get an education and those types of things. And I think for me, I just felt like I do have a bit of a responsibility to change lives. And I think as a business owner, your business impacts people's lives, right? And you almost need to have that in the back of your mind, is how do you make a positive impact and positive change. So we do have Malander for Change, and it's a very small internal sort of foundation, if you want to call it that we run, that looks at saying how do we empower individuals to get access to the job market, and that's kind of the key behind that. But I do also co-chair FinBiz2030, which is an initiative between chartered accountants worldwide and One Young World. Now, One Young World, a massive organization that is doing so much great things around the world, and chartered accountants worldwide, which encompasses a lot of the accounting bodies around the world. And our main aim is to mobilize the finance and business community to be able to act to achieve these sustainable development goals. So for those of you who don't know what the sustainable development goals are, they were set by the UN, and it's effectively goals that we want to achieve by 2030 that would make the world a better place. And I think there's an element of, and again, it goes back to the definition of success, right? So for a lot of us, success might mean money, big houses, big sort of fancy cars, all those types of things, and that's great, and that's an element of success. But there's also sort of, it comes back to what your definition of it is, right? And for me, sort of building something for the future is exactly what we're looking to do. And if we're looking to build a business for the future, what business do we have if there is no future? So if we don't have a planet in 10 years time, or if there's a shortage of water and it starts world wars and it kind of is a threat to our planet or threat to our livelihood later down the line, building a business actually doesn't mean anything, right? Because we've built something that's not going to exist because of external factors. We've seen how COVID can impact the world and impact people's livelihoods. And it's a simple disease, and I say simple very, very loosely, but that can cripple and put the world on its knees, right? And I think we all have the ability as moving into professionals to be able to make that positive difference for the people around us. And it's not necessarily just for the benefit of everyone else, but if we're building something and we're looking to the future, we then can effectively say that we are trying to secure a future both for ourselves and everyone else.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, so the Levels App platform is actually a career guidance tool that assists secondary school learners apply to university, and it actually speaks directly to goal 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals. So very important for everyone to do their part, you know, and to play their part in creating a world that is sustainable and, you know, that will be a better world than we found it, as it were. Thank you so much, Lyle, for your time. Thank you very much for, you know, sparing the time to speak to us, to engage us, and to really make a difference and an impact on the lives of all of the people in the Levels Up community. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? Any parting shots to everyone in the Levels Up community?
Yeah, firstly, thanks so much for all your questions, and really hope that I wish that I could have got into all of them. But definitely, if you do feel like you have a burning question, please don't hesitate to reach out or reach out on social media. But yeah, I think to each and every one of you, I mean, just by being here, you've shown an interest in the next steps in your career, which is very impressive. And I think I certainly look forward to seeing each of you in leadership positions going forward. And I think don't underestimate the power of what you can achieve. I think each and every one of us has the ability to achieve great things, and don't mold that on what anyone else is achieving, right? Success is for me is defined by what your ability is to see your own goals and your own dreams, and goals and dreams differ from person to person. So chasing success doesn't necessarily mean chasing money, but it means chasing the future that you envision for yourself. So I mean, I'm very excited to see all of you in the future and kind of watch and see you guys grow into the brilliant leaders that you deserve to be. So all the best in your studies. For those of you in matric, good luck. For those of you in university, good luck for the upcoming exams. And put in the efforts. It's definitely worth it in the long run.
Stunning. Thank you so much, Lyle. Thank you. Really, really inspiring words. And if people would like to get a hold of you on social media, can you just share your social media handles and platforms where you are on social?
Perfect. So if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, you can just search for me, Lyle Malander, on LinkedIn. It's Lyle M on Instagram, on Facebook, Lyle Malander as well. So please feel free to reach out.
Okay. All right. So we'll announce the winner of the winning question on Instagram and Facebook. So thank you very much to everyone for your questions. Thank you very much, Lyle, for making the time. We'll reach out to you and you'll decide what the winning question is. And yes, just to echo Lyle's words, it really starts with you. And this is a step in the right direction for you to develop yourself. By joining this session, you've chosen to invest in yourself. And, the future is bright. The world is your oyster. And everything just starts in moments like these. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our session. We'll see you next week, Saturday, same time, where we'll be hosting an award-winning top actuary, Rina Bedela, who is the CFO of Absa Financial Services. Follow us on social media, on LinkedIn and on Facebook to find out more about what we'll have up in store for you. But for now, good day, goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your Mandela Day. Make sure to do your 67 minutes and take care. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks.